The crystalline corridors of the Astrian High Council reflected only precision, nothing more, nothing less. Designed with perfect symmetry and tuned to the exact frequency of mental clarity, every panel pulsed with ambient blue light to aid telepathic communication. Silence reigned not just as a matter of decorum but as an essential feature of Astrian design. For the Astrians had long transcended words. Emotions were culled, filtered out through generations of neural engineering. Love, joy, sorrow, even curiosity, these had been classified as inefficient. The future belonged to logic. Talia Nix, chief diplomatic liaison for the High Council, moved through the corridor with mechanical grace. Her measured strides, down to the millimeter, echoed against polished quartz-like walls. She kept her breathing at exactly 16 breaths per minute. Her posture, perfectly upright. Not a single strand of her dark, tightly coiled hair moved out of place. She was a prime example of what the Astrians had cultivated for centuries, a flawless, emotionless vessel of telepathic clarity. And today, she had been summoned to meet a human. Diplomat Nix, came the flat voice of First Minister Undul, transmitted via neural link rather than spoken aloud. The human envoy has arrived. You will receive him. I will fulfill this duty with optimal efficiency, she replied. She entered the reception hall, a high-vaulted chamber ringed with light-frequency projectors and floating glyphs of greeting in hundreds of galactic dialects. The floor beneath her shimmered with reactive pressure sensors, each movement logged and optimized for future refinement. Then the doors parted with a soft hum. And he walked in. Jameson Reed moved nothing like an Astrian. There was an unnecessary sway to his step, a rhythm that served no kinetic advantage. His eyes scanned with visible motion rather than telepathic sweep. And worst of all, his face, a constantly shifting theater of emotion, smiled. He smiled at her. Diplomat Nix, he said aloud, extending his hand, a ritual she had reviewed countless times in the human cultural files. It's a pleasure to meet you. I've heard remarkable things about your work in the Proxima negotiations. She stared at his hand for 2.4 seconds, calculated that it would be considered rude not to reciprocate, and extended her own. Contact was made. Warmth. Pressure. Friction. Unfamiliar sensations cascaded through her neural pathways. She withdrew her hand. The Proxima situation required logical resolution. Your journey was efficient. It was comfortable, he said, still smiling. Though I missed seeing the stars during warp. Something poetic about them, don't you think? Poetic. She filed the term for analysis. The diplomatic quarters have been adjusted to your biological requirements, she said. Formal negotiations will begin tomorrow at first light. Actually, Jameson said, leaning forward ever so slightly, I was hoping we could start with an informal discussion. Talia paused. Informal? A human concept. In Astrian culture, there was no such distinction. Informal discussion is not standard protocol. Maybe that's why your people and mine remain at an impasse, he said. Sometimes, the unexpected path leads to the best destination. A flicker, small and fast, like a static glitch, moved through her mental field. She dismissed it. I will adapt to this approach if it serves the diplomatic mission. He smiled again. Excellent. Let's start with something simple. Tell me, not what you think or what your protocols require, but what you wish for the future of our peoples. Wish. The word floated in the air between them, foreign and weighted. Astrians did not wish. They optimized. They analyzed. They achieved. Yet the question lodged somewhere within her, like a spark in a sealed chamber. The next day, their meeting was not held in a standard negotiation room. Instead, at Jameson's request, they met in the Astrian Botanical Observatory, a dome-shaped sanctuary housing flora from across the galaxy. Designed for xenobiological research and climate testing, it was one of the few places where Astrians allowed beauty to exist untethered from utility. Talia observed the dome's structural reinforcement matrix even as she walked. The twin moons of Astrea cast overlapping violet shadows across the garden. She found Jameson already seated on a stone bench, gazing up. "You've been avoiding my questions," he said. "Every time I ask about you, not diplomat Nix but Talia, you redirect. The distinction is irrelevant. I am my function. Is that what they've taught you?" He gestured to a flowering vine, a cascade of purple blossoms hanging like glass chandeliers. "This plant, wisteria, from Earth, it also has a function, to grow, to bloom, to reproduce. But no poet writes about that. They write about how it makes them feel." Talia's gaze remained fixed. Feelings are considered evolutionary redundancies. Jameson was silent for 7.3 seconds, longer than average human conversational pause. "Say that again," he said. "But without quoting your training manual." The request created a momentary processing lag. "I believe emotions complicate what could be simple." "Better," he said, smiling. "Now, why does your society maintain this garden?" "These plants were selected for beauty. Not just function." She blinked once. "Perhaps, beauty has functional value." He leaned closer. "Exactly. That's what human diplomacy is based on: intuition, empathy, connection." He reached into his coat pocket and retrieved a small device. A simple player with a single waveform indicator. "Try this. It's music, Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. Over 6 centuries old." He activated the device. And then it began. Sound, nothing like the data tones of Astrian announcements. These were layered, undulating vibrations. Each note tugged at something deep within her mind. Her breathing pattern shifted. Pupils dilated. Neural synapses fired in asynchronous patterns. She was experiencing something. "What does it make you feel?" She opened her mouth. Closed it. Tried again. "It is like watching stellar formation through a telescope. A vastness." Jameson's expression shifted, delight. "That's it. A simile. The beginning of emotional language." Over the next 3 weeks, Talia and Jameson continued these unsanctioned sessions. Officially, they called them cultural briefings. But their conversations ranged far beyond protocol. They debated poetry. He showed her earth paintings, symphonies, theatrical plays. She explained Astrian telepathic harmonics and their architecture's resonance-based design. And slowly, her internal systems began to change. She started accessing human art during rest periods. She dreamed. A phenomenon eradicated from Astrian minds 4 generations ago. And in these dreams, she saw Jameson. Not as a diplomat. But as a presence. A warmth. She stopped reporting these experiences to the medical division. Then came the message. First Minister Undul had summoned her to present the final terms of the joint negotiation. Before the full council. And the scans during her speech would be detailed. Neural scans. Emotional detection protocols. Telepathic pattern analysis. Talia stared at her reflection in the polished obsidian mirror of her quarters. For the first time, she didn't see a diplomat. She saw a woman on the edge of something unnamed. And she didn't want to step back. The council chamber was colder than usual. Whether by design or perception, she couldn't say. She stood at the podium, Jameson at her side. She delivered the proposal in flawless Astrian cadence. Each point crisp. Logical. Supported by data. Then Jameson took the floor. And he told a story. Not a report. Not a list of bullet points. He spoke of 2 species trying to bridge an ancient divide. He used metaphors. He spoke of light finding purchase in glass. Of harmony arising from dissonance. He mentioned her by name. The council recessed to deliberate. She and Jameson were escorted to the antechamber to await the outcome. He turned to her. "You were brilliant. I delivered the proposal with optimal clarity. You also looked beautiful in that light." The word struck her with force. Beautiful. She'd never been called that. Before she could reply, the chamber doors opened. Minister Vin entered, flanked by two neural technicians. "Diplomat Nix, report to the neural assessment chamber immediately." "Why?" "Irregular neural patterns detected during council monitoring." "Emotional activation." Jameson stepped forward. "This is a mistake. This is not a human matter," Vin said sharply. "It is Astrian protocol." Talia nodded once. "I will comply." But as she turned away, her hand brushed Jameson's. It lingered. Longer than it should have. And the message in that touch said everything protocol could not. The neural assessment chamber was clinically white, devoid of all unnecessary stimuli. Talia Nix sat upright in the diagnostics chair as silver-threaded monitoring nodes adhered to her scalp and spine. The data projected across holographic panels pulsed in sterile lines of light. No sound, no emotion. Just metrics. Minister Vin, head of behavioral compliance, reviewed her scans with a detachment even Talia now found unsettling. "Your neural pathways show increased activation in the limbic system. 22% deviation from baseline since your initial contact with the human. Correlation does not imply causation," she stated, her tone flat, masking the churn beneath. "Access logs show repeated interaction with human art and unsanctioned cultural media. Moonlight Sonata. Earth poetry. Visual dramatizations. Emotional artifacts." Talia lowered her eyes slightly. "Not in shame. In calculation. You are scheduled for neural recalibration tomorrow at first light. Emotional deviation must be corrected." Corrected. The word echoed in her mind like an old song. Jameson was waiting outside the administrative complex, despite no notification being sent. His posture was casual, but his eyes searched her face with intensity. "I asked around," he said. "Are you okay?" Talia hesitated. "I am uncertain." "They're recalibrating you, aren't they?" She nodded. He cursed softly under his breath. "That's Astrian protocol," she cut in. Jameson reached out, touching her forearm lightly, a gesture she had come to interpret as comfort. "Talia, you don't have to go through with it. You've changed. You feel things now. That's real." Her neural architecture fired in erratic pulses. Her hands trembled, a subtle quake that once would have horrified her. Now, she simply acknowledged it. "Will you walk with me?" she asked. They moved silently through the garden paths of the diplomatic quarter. The twin moons hung above, casting fractured shadows across the flora. Talia stopped beside a luminescent tree whose petals shimmered in response to motion. "I accessed dreams last night," she said. "What did you dream about?" She turned to him, her voice nearly a whisper. "Colors that don't exist. Music without sound. And, you." Jameson blinked. Then took her hand slowly, as if not to startle the moment. "They're wrong about what makes someone whole. Feeling isn't a flaw. It's the proof that you're alive." She breathed deeply. "Before meeting you, I never questioned what I was made to be. Now, I'm becoming something I can't define." Jameson stepped closer. "You don't have to define it. Just don't let them erase it." That night, Talia returned to her quarters but did not rest. Instead, she compiled every neural log, every biometric variance. She reviewed her own dreams, downloaded them into encoded memory chips. The images, Jameson's face in starlight, the sound of music laced through silence, she saved them not as data, but as memory. In the stillness of her chamber, she whispered the word, awakening. Morning came too quickly. Instead of reporting to the recalibration center, Talia accessed the override on her diplomatic credentials and redirected her clearance to the Botanical Observatory. The dome's roof remained sealed, but she manually dimmed the artificial lights, letting the glow of the moons filter through. The violet and silver hues bathed her skin. She sent a single message through her private communicator to Jameson, "Meet me where we first talked about beauty." He arrived minutes later, eyes wide with understanding. "Are you running?" She shook her head. "Choosing." He moved to stand beside her. "What will they do?" "Recalibration. Isolation. Perhaps even dismissal from my position." "And still you came." She turned to face him. "Because I don't want to lose what I've found. I don't want to forget what it feels like to feel." Jameson reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Then don't." She leaned into his touch, and this time, didn't analyze the sensation. She simply let it be. "They say emotions weaken telepathic clarity," she whispered. "But you're clearer than anyone I've ever known." Their foreheads met. A shared breath between them. The closest thing to a shared soul. And as moonlight wrapped around them, Talia realized she was no longer. The crystalline corridors of the Astrian High Council pulsed faintly with rhythmic blue light as Talia Nix walked with purposeful steps, not toward the recalibration chamber as ordered, but toward the Grand Council chamber itself. Her internal chronometer marked the time precisely. It was 6:02 at dawn, optimal for telepathic synchronization across the networked minds of the Astrian elite. Every instinct trained into her urged caution, retreat, obedience. But something stronger pushed her forward now. She had no formal appointment. No authorization. She was, by every definition of Astrian law, in breach of protocol. And yet her footsteps never faltered. Because this was not a diplomatic mission, it was a declaration of self. The massive doors of the chamber opened without resistance. A silent acknowledgement by the Council's internal systems that she was expected, even if uninvited. Rows of seated officials, First Minister Undul among them, turned their expressionless faces to her. "Diplomat Nix," Undul said, voice neutral. "You are in violation of a recalibration directive." "Explain." Talia stood at the central presentation platform, her pulse quickening despite years of bioneural control. She met the minister's gaze. "I will not submit to recalibration," she said. A psychic ripple passed through the room, not spoken, but felt by every mind present. "Disruption. Your emotional contamination has progressed," Vin said, rising from his place among the Behavioral Compliance Division. "You are compromised." "No," Talia replied. "I am awakened." The word struck like a chime across glass. It was archaic. Dangerous. Emotional. "Explain yourself," Undul said. "We have believed, for generations, that emotions degrade our telepathic precision. That logic must rule all things. But in the course of my diplomatic interactions with the human envoy, I have discovered something profound. Emotions do not cloud clarity. They deepen it." Gasps. Verbal ones. A rarity in any Astrian gathering. "This is unacceptable," Vin snapped. "You are propagating untested hypotheses based on illegal interaction with foreign cultural materials." "They are not illegal," Talia replied. "They are unacknowledged. We fear what we cannot quantify, and so we have outlawed what we no longer understand." A silence settled. Then she took one step closer to the center. "I propose a demonstration." Minister Undul exchanged glances with his fellow councillors, then gave a slight nod. The doors opened again. Jameson entered, flanked by a pair of council guards who did not impede his progress. His presence caused another ripple, even more pronounced than Talia's declaration. No alien had ever been permitted within the council chamber during active session. He met her at the center. No words passed between them. Just his hand brushing hers. She reached out with her mind, not the way she'd been trained, but the way she'd discovered. Not with sterile streams of data, but with feeling. With memory. With the raw tapestry of dreams, longing, warmth, and the sound of music played in moonlight. She projected it. The room was engulfed in silence as Talia opened a link to every council member simultaneously. Through their minds passed the moment of her first emotional reaction to Beethoven's sonata, the tactile sensation of Jameson's fingers against hers, the vivid image of the starlight reflected in human eyes, the feeling of being seen, truly seen, for the first time in a life of engineered detachment. Some counselors drew back. Others closed their eyes. For the first time in recorded history, Astrians were receiving emotional content. When she finally broke the link, the silence was profound. Undul spoke first, his voice low and strained. "What was that?" "Connection," Talia answered. "Not just understanding, but resonance. We have optimized our minds but lost our hearts. I believe we can reclaim both." Vin stepped forward. "You have altered your neural patterns beyond recoverable parameters. You are unfit to serve as liaison." "Then strip me of my title," Talia replied, standing taller. "But know this, you cannot unsee what I have shown you. I am not broken. I am evolving." Another ripple passed through the room. Not disruption this time, but inquiry. Possibility. Undul studied her long. Then, at last, he said, "Return to your quarters. The council must deliberate." Jameson and Talia exited the chamber together, walking in silence until they were far beyond the listening walls. "That was the most reckless, beautiful thing I've ever seen," he said. "Do you think they will arrest me?" "Maybe. Do you think it was worth it?" He turned, pulling her into an embrace. Her body stiffened, then slowly melted into his. "Yes. Every moment." That night, no guards came. Instead, an encrypted message arrived. From Undul. "Further testing required. Your method holds potential. Prepare a formal proposal." Talia stared at the message long after it faded from her screen. For the first time, she was not a diplomat following a directive. She was the author of one. She looked out her window at the stars. "They're listening now," she whispered. And in the dim light, Jameson took her hand again. "Then let's show them everything." The twin moons of Astria were near their zenith, casting overlapping silver-violet shadows across the quiet expanse of the diplomatic botanical observatory. Though the structure was officially closed at this hour, Talia Nix had overridden the access protocol once again. There was no reprimand this time. No security lockout. The systems had accepted her request like it belonged to her. She stood near the central reflecting pool, surrounded by bioluminescent flora collected from 50 worlds. The glowing blossoms painted her pale blue skin with soft flickers of light. Her hands were clasped behind her back, posture tight with thought, not regulation. Jameson arrived moments later, as if the stars themselves had told him where to find her. "You called," he said softly, approaching across the flagstone path that shimmered beneath the moons. "I needed space to think," she replied without turning. Then, after a pause, "And I needed you." He stopped at her side but said nothing, giving her the silence she needed. Talia finally spoke. "The council has allowed me time. Time to propose a new initiative. They haven't approved anything yet. But they haven't erased me." Jameson nodded slowly. "That's not a no. That's a maybe." She turned toward him, violet eyes catching the starlight. "And yet, even now, I feel suspended between two truths. One that says I am evolving. And another that says I am falling apart." He took a slow breath. "You're feeling. That's all. That's what it means to be alive. You say that as though it's a comfort." He offered a small smile. "It is. Eventually." Talia looked up, following the trail of stars that curved above them like an ancient script. Before I met you, I believed in the perfection of my people. Our logic. Our clarity. I believed emotions were a disease. And now? Now I know they are not a disease. They are. She struggled, then finished, a signal. A resonance. Like harmonics from a crystal structure, impossible to hear until the right frequency vibrates through it. Jameson turned to fully face her. And what are you vibrating with now, Talia? She hesitated. Then stepped closer. When I close my eyes, I see colors that weren't there before. When I think of the future, I feel fear, and hope. I feel wonder. Jameson reached out, lightly cupping her cheek with his hand. Her skin flushed slightly beneath his touch. I dreamed again last night, she whispered. You were in it. But it wasn't like before. We were in a place with wind, and rain, and sun. And I wasn't a diplomat. I wasn't even Astrian. I was just, me. And you looked at me like I wasn't strange. Like I was something to be loved. His expression shifted. You are. She leaned into his hand, closing her eyes. I don't know what to call this, what's happening inside me. We call it awakening. She opened her eyes again. I want it to be real. I want to keep it. But my people might not allow it. Then don't let them take it. She took his other hand, holding both between hers. Her voice trembled for the first time. Jameson, what if they force me to choose between my duty and this? Between my people and you? He looked down at their joined hands. Then we find a way that doesn't require choosing. A new path. One no one has dared to walk before. She laughed softly. It was a beautiful sound, light, uncertain, and completely alien to Astrian ears. Do you always say the impossible like it's probable? Only when I mean it. They stood in stillness, the only sound the soft ripple of the reflecting pool and the distant hum of nocturnal biomes adjusting to lunar light. What do you want, Talia? Not as a diplomat. Not for your people. But for you. She didn't answer immediately. Her mind, so trained to calculate and optimize, now spun in strange, fluid directions. But the answer rose from somewhere deeper. I want to be more than what I was engineered to be. I want to know what it means to be fully alive. And I want to do it, with you. Jameson stepped closer. Their bodies nearly touched. His voice dropped. Then say it. Not like an Astrian. Like a human. She inhaled slowly. Then, with trembling lips, she whispered, I love you. A silence fell, more powerful than before. And then Jameson kissed her. It was gentle, reverent, a meeting of beings from different worlds who had finally found a shared language. When they parted, Talia's eyes shimmered, not with neural discharges, but tears. Real, physical tears. A trait long thought extinct among her kind. You cried, he said. I didn't know I still could. You can now. Because you chose this. She pressed her forehead to his. If tomorrow they demand my resignation, if they exile me from the council, I'll still have this. Still have you. You'll have more than that, he said. You'll have yourself. They stayed like that, together, until the moons began their descent and the horizon whispered hints of dawn. The morning light spilled across the crystalline architecture of the Astrian High Council chambers like molten silver. Where once the structure had felt sterile and silent, today it hummed with a kind of cautious energy. The moment had come. Talia Nix stood alone at the center of the grand chamber. She wore no diplomatic adornments, no insignia, no neural regulators. Her appearance was minimalist by Astrian standards, but not void of grace. Her hair flowed freely down her back. Her posture, once so tightly wound, was open. Grounded. Alive. Every council member was present. First Minister Undul sat at the high dais, flanked by Vin and the other senior officials. A few of them regarded her with unreadable expressions. Others had deliberately lowered their telepathic shields, an unheard-of gesture that acknowledged curiosity. And behind her, quietly seated among the visiting observers, was Jameson. Talia took a breath and began. "Esteemed council members," she said, her voice even. But this time, it wasn't perfectly modulated. There were rises, falls, pauses, human patterns. "I stand before you not as a diplomat under review, but as the product of an experiment you did not authorize, an experiment that succeeded nonetheless." A murmur of neural contact buzzed through the chamber. "You tasked me with understanding the human mind. But what I discovered was not just comprehension. It was convergence. Emotion, sensation, instinct, these are not inefficiencies. They are bridges. We have trained ourselves for centuries to communicate without them. We believed understanding could only exist in the realm of clarity. I am here to tell you, that is not enough." Undul leaned forward. "You claim clarity is insufficient. Clarity allows us to transmit data. Feeling allows us to transmit meaning." She raised her hand, slowly, palm open. Her fingers trembled, not with weakness, but with the anticipation of vulnerability. "Yesterday, I showed you a glimpse. Today, I propose a new path. One where emotional resonance is studied alongside telepathic signal. Where intuition is not dismissed, but mapped. Where Astrians no longer view feeling as a contagion, but as a signal we simply forgot how to read." "And what would you call this path?" Vin asked, his tone cold. She turned to look at him directly. "Evolution." Another pause. Undul's eyes closed briefly, his thoughts spinning fast enough for even untrained minds to sense. Then, with a quiet command, he said, "Demonstrate." Talia closed her eyes. She didn't reach for her internal modulation systems. She didn't check her biometric outputs. She simply remembered. She remembered standing in moonlight with Jameson. The feeling of his hand in hers. The sound of music that couldn't be described, only felt. The colors that only existed in dreams. And then she reached out. The psychic wave that pulsed through the chamber was unlike any recorded transmission. It carried not words or structured thoughts, but layered impressions, awe, uncertainty, longing, joy, vulnerability. And at the heart of it, connection. For a moment, even the most hardened officials sat back in silence. Vin gritted his teeth. "This is emotional coercion." "No," Undul interrupted softly. "This is something we cannot yet name." The chamber was still. For 13 whole seconds. Then Undul stood. "The recalibration directive is formally suspended." Gasps, psychic and verbal, echoed. "A new research initiative will be established. Diplomat Talia Nix will lead it, with the human representative as co-director." Vin stepped forward. "You would allow her to remain corrupted?" Undul's voice was quiet. "Perhaps she is not corrupted. Perhaps she is a precursor." The weeks that followed were unprecedented. Talia and Jameson were given access to a multidisciplinary research lab previously reserved for first contact studies. They developed interfaces that combined human emotional patterning with Astrian telepathic precision. Together, they designed the first curriculum of emotional linguistic diplomacy. Talia often found herself walking the garden paths of the observatory late at night. Sometimes alone. Sometimes with Jameson. One evening, as stars painted the sky, he turned to her. "Do you think your people will truly change?" "They are already changing. Slowly. Quietly. But it has begun." "And what about you?" She smiled, the gesture now easy, unforced. "I am changing too. For the first time in my life, I dream of things that can't be optimized. I feel joy without needing to define it. I feel love without needing to suppress it. Jameson reached for her hand. She took it. What comes next? We teach them, she said, voice full. We teach them how to feel. And then, under the vast canvas of stars, he kissed her again. Not as a diplomat. Not as a teacher. But as someone who had seen her soul and whispered the impossible. And this time, she didn't just hear it. She believed it.